So we have a huge welcome to say to Erin Ellis, who is one of my very long-term old friends from college. I mean, how many years ago was that?
It is just 15 almost.
It is just insane. So
is this Eastman?
Eastman. So I met Erin for the first time. Erin is a fabulous cellist who's teaching at the University of West Virginia, right?
Other way around, West Virginia University, but close enough.
I never got it right with the colleges. But yeah, so Erin and myself actually met in the Eastman Graduate Chamber Music Ensemble. Cool. So we all auditioned, and then we were just brought all around the place playing chamber music. And it was beautiful. So we played one of my favorites, Schubert Quintet, right?
That's right. You're so right. But didn't we also play Brahms together?
Yes, we did. So we just played some really kick-ass chamber music.
Awesome.
Which, what a lovely way to meet another cellist, eh?
Yes.
So, yeah. So tell us, Erin, a little bit about you. Obviously, you're very close to a place where Katie's festival is.
Close.
That's right.
Close, like 5 hours away, probably.
You know,
close by there.
Yeah, right, exactly. It's like 3.5 probably from where you're going. Like you're kind of like in the DC part of the state, and I'm in the Pittsburgh part of the state. So we're like an hour and change south of the Pittsburgh airport.
So tell us this: why did you choose Popper 11 when you were choosing Popper Fund?
I was like, you were like, these are the ones that were left, and I was like, oh God, please be Popper 11, and it was there because I teach this one all the time. Like this is I just feel like a lot of my students are kind of at that sweet spot where they're just maybe starting to do a few poppers.
Yeah.
And so this is usually the first one that I do out of the set with students.
Actually this one is quite a nice one that can set people off into a boat of popper love as opposed to popper destruction.
Guys, you'll love this. On the eve of today, I have a new student at Durham who is doing popper for the first time, and I set this one.
Aww.
But it was very much inspired by you, Erin, because I sort of anticipated that you might say something along these lines. So I was like, I'm going to go ahead and assign this one.
I like it.
So thank you for inspiring me before even meeting me.
Well, right back at you, because like you were doing that chamber festival, and I was like, I gotta meet this girl at some point. And then Ailbhe, you just like you messaged me, and it was
it was all meant to be.
Cello bringing people together.
Cello love everywhere.
Exactly. I teach this one, or sometimes 36 that's at the end of the book. It's between those two.
Yeah, that's a nice one too.
Yeah, I like this one because it's a little chromatic, which stretches students a lot of the time, but it doesn't even go into thumb position.
Yeah.
So like that's what I like about it. For me, the biggest teaching point is understanding that something being chromatic doesn't mean that it's outside of a hand position. So like some of the chromatic stuff, it's all within a hand position, and you just shift the hand position down. So that's like a major teaching point for me. I'm curious what your biggest teaching point would be for this one, but that's the one for me, I think.
Yeah, actually, you just reminded me because I saw this amazing video of Erin teaching vibrato. Oh my God, I loved it. Where your student was like, yeah, and like Erin was like, yeah, we've got it, and I was like, yes. That is the kind of teaching you want.
Oh, God.
The pat on the back, the beauty moment, So actually, this is a similar thing for me because Katie knows I'm obsessed with bow circles because of Steve Durham, right?
And she's the bow circle queen, this one.
Well,
me too.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, this is an Eastman thing that kind of transferred on. And I always find when people have problems with any passage, it's always to do with the string crossings and not having worked out, are you going anti-clockwise or clockwise? So here, this is another great one, like the Lohengrin study. I can't remember which number that is.
20.
I think that's 19.
Oh, there you go. I mean, that's just embarrassing that she pulled it out. I mean, we've so many poppers on our brain at this point. I don't think all molded into one. So basically, the bow circle thing of so my anti-clockwise start, still anti-clockwise, clockwise, anti-clockwise, still there. So you're actually, you've got three notes in a row, and then it's just not a big deal. Otherwise it can kind of feel a bit like, oh god. So
Yeah, because
people need
like
to
a lot of times this is like the first time that they've had to cross not one string but two,
Sure.
like many times in a row. So that's a big teaching point. You're right too. And then I don't know. I teach a lot of finger before bow in this one too. Like I'm trying to find. Oh yeah. So making sure the left hand goes before the bow.
I would always call that stop-go practice.
Yeah.
And I actually we're always talking about the fact that teachers never really slow it down. I mean, you should be there, but to actually practice it for the first time, you might have to do move, go, move, go. So slow it down to a point that it's as slow as you need it, and don't be judged. Don't be feeling under pressure. Slow is perfect, because then after that, it'll be super easy to speed it up. Right?
Yeah, I mean, I have a motto that, like, if I know exactly what you're practicing, you're not practicing it appropriately. I mean, maybe that's not fair, because I know what you're practicing.
Oh, yeah.
But
save your time, perform it when you need to. Ailbhe's the queen of that one.
Yeah. I never play any of the repeats in the poppers until the day we have to play it, because it's a waste of my time, right?
Time is money for this one.
What did you think, Katie?
Well, you know what I was going to say? I mean, there's some teaching points I'd like to point out, but first of all, this is something we constantly talk about in these poppers, which is like actually practicing, starting on the correct bowing, like if you're starting out of context and starting on the right bowing. Because I had a different edition until about 20 minutes ago. And I realized that the edition I was playing off of actually has a lot of different bowings. The Sparenwriter edition we're using adds in a lot of slurs and stuff. And it really threw me. I realized how much, that practice, even though I'd been doing, thinking about bow circles and all of that.
Yeah. One slur changes all your
One slur changes it all. And even though it might be like beneficial to your overall playing, it's not going to specifically help you improve this study.
Yeah.
And then the other thing, I mean, because I'm such a orchestral cellist nerd, I mean, obviously if anyone's doing Beethoven 8, for in the symphony or for an excerpt, I mean, this is the study.
Yeah.
I mean, without a doubt, and I think as well, I mean, it's marked moderato. Ailbhe and I had a few queries about what's the appropriate tempo for this. What do you think, Erin?
I tend to go slower than most people, and I don't. So when you hear my recording, it is a little bit scenic.
Oh, I love it.
But I like that because, I mean, another cool thing is you can teach like a Bach bass line here too.
Oh yeah,
that's true.
So like beep, burp, 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 and then. So
it's really pretty, isn't it? I love that. Mm-hmm. It's just like so juicy.
Right. And if you go too fast, sometimes you miss that a little bit. But Katie, I'm curious. Do you start this one down bow or up bow?
I've been starting it down bow. Do you start it up bow?
Well, I've been starting it down bow too, but then I was playing around with starting it up bow. I think it's more challenging that way because, to your point, like about the bow circles, it's a much different feeling. This feels pretty easy, but this requires some engagement of the fingers, I think. So.
And also, a huge thing about the open A strings, which happen everywhere, often you'll get this sound.
Right.
And you have to temper the weight in your bow every time there is an open string of any kind. So,
right.
I think that's a brilliant idea that everyone practicing this should practice it both ways around.
Yeah, well, at least, if you're practicing the first four measures, be able to do it both ways. Because I actually don't use open A at the beginning, too. I know I demonstrated it with an open A, but I tend not to for exactly the same reason. Because that's a two-string crossing instead of just, So, I mean...
I was talking to a cellist today, and because this is now what I do is nerdy chats about poppers. Martin. Yeah. So he says he also teaches this one a lot for the same reasons. And it's funny because he said in bar 11, in this one, I was laughing because I was like, presumably you have to practice the same effect and be able to do it on both up and down bow. I mean, that's the thing I find hard.
Wait,
but
so down, up, up?
So in that bar, which
that's really cool.
That sounds really good.
It does, except I was like, yeah, so that's definitely easier. But like, it's get new students to do that. Like, we're studying popper here. This must be easy.
Yeah, like, can you do those alternating up-bow, down-bow accents?
Exactly.
Come on.
I want to hear that grit on your first finger.
Wow. Well, but you know, I can't believe I didn't think of that, because sometimes it's just too, it's like, okay, sure, I would love for every student that plays this Etude to be able to do up bow and down bow accents equally. Yeah. However, we don't have 6 months to work on that, so sometimes I feel like you got to cut your losses a little bit and just make it a little, okay, I learned something.
It's been very interesting for us because I learned the popper Etudes I learned as a kid through the international edition that everybody had.
That's the one that I'm using, yeah.
Yeah, no, exactly. And then, so now I'm looking, because I actually don't think that the Baron Writer is actually better. I think it's different.
Okay. We have strong opinions about the Baron Writer.
We've just a lot of strong opinions, let's put it that way. So, what's good in the Baron Writer is they have practice tempos and then real tempos. Now, often I think they're utter madness. Mm-hmm. What's interesting about it is, I think if you're a student and you're approaching it, it's just another idea, like what we're doing here.
Right.
So it doesn't necessarily mean that it is the only idea. It's just something. So, for example, this one, I personally thought their tempo was too slow, because what I was going for was a lighter approach than probably Germanic approach.
By the way, in case you're curious, the tempo they give is 76.
Yeah.
So.
To the quarter or dotted quarter note. Or
no,
quarter note?
Just quarter note. Dotted quarter, yeah, sorry.
Yeah.
Hilarious.
Oh, okay. I play it a little faster than that. I think I was going to like 85 or something.
That's where we reach as a nice, lovely tempo. Where nothing feels too. As soon as you get higher than that, then suddenly that.
And you'll see, I tend to take some lovely rubato there.
I think speaking of like musical things like rubato, did anyone else? I don't know if it's because I'm practicing this Mad Boccherini stuff at the moment, but I thought that bit sounded so Espanol, like
it's so
good, especially when we're very fandango. Yeah, it's something like super Spanishy. I'm just like,
I love that. I sense a new version coming out from you.
Wait.
I know. I mean, so I programmed this in a concert with the two Boccherini.
I love it. So the other one I thought was a lovely moment was 30. You know, where it suddenly just turns into this like, it's just so like, suddenly dancey after all of this mad like, all that kind of crazy harmonic stuff. Suddenly it's like this cute little toy or something that's like.
Interestingly, so speaking of editions, so one of my former teacher has an edition of this himself, Richard Erin, and so I kind of looked at that just to see what the ideas were there, and he actually continues the slur pattern. So he continues that through that whole passage.
I did wonder why that was there. The sudden staccato change, doesn't make sense.
Really. I mean, I ended up, kind of sticking with the staccatos there because I think it's kind of a fun piece of variety. But I guess from a teaching standpoint, it does kind of, it's a little weird because it's the same pattern.
Yeah. I mean, definitely, I think there's so much in this. I mean, another thing I wanted to bring up is the dynamic contrast in this one. It has some really specific dynamics. And I mean, in this area where we're talking about, just at the beginning of that passage is a subito piano from fortissimo, very dramatic.
It's also kind of comes out of nowhere, right?
Yeah. So suddenly, like, the floor drops out from underneath. So I think maybe and I always say this about popper, it's like one thing to play all the right notes in these, but to do the articulations and the dynamics. I mean, like, in a way, I think changing from the slurred to the articulated bit in that moment is like such an amazing opportunity to practice control in your technique, you know, whilst like creating this crescendo and stuff. But anyway,
yeah, and I mean that's something that like once we get past the chromatics and then the bow like string crossings, it's like there's kind of no limit to what you can polish, quote unquote, in this one. And like I found when I was like, oh, I know this one, no problem. And then when I was preparing it, I was like, oh my goodness, like, whoa, wait, what about this or what about that? It just was like an onion that I kept peeling back, and I was like, okay, well, this is why people are still practicing it. This is why I assign this sucker every semester to someone. Because like even the most advanced cellist, I'm learning stuff about my playing from practicing this. So
oh my gosh,
I know it.
Well, I find that really fascinating because that moment for me, I always think when you have to do suddenly some kind of tiny little, suddenly you have to in your bow feel a little bit more. It's a common thing that people feel like they should be looser somehow, but when you need to be more articulated, you need to actually have a firmer hold on your bow on the pads. Because
I was just talking about this with a student. Like the fingers are like your teeth in your tongue. Yeah. So 100%. Like if you want people to not understand you, then just don't articulate at all. But if you want people to understand you, you're going to be really firm, right? But you're not going to be like talking like this, right? Yeah. So that's the analogy that I use. I mean, what do y'all use when you talk about that?
Yeah, I use
that for now on.
I talk about consonants a lot,
okay.
And the big thing often is, I think, because obviously every cellist in the history of time at some point keeps forgetting about their pinky, and the pinky is your friend for consonants. You know, so what I tend to do is get people to practice a lot with two fingers up in the air, and so they have to, and then when you put the fingers back, suddenly you're trying to get a loose hand, wrist, all of that, but the pads and the thumb. So it's kind of like having the suppleness of the suspension of a car here, but having a firm tire grip. So you've just got knee tires, essentially.
Treads, yeah.
I like that too. I think maybe one thing to add to that that's a little different than what we would normally think about, I think it's something to remember with articulation is also, you know, the anticipation of the motion, even if it's a really small motion.
Yeah.
If the hand isn't like anticipated, or not the hand, if everything that's happening in the arm isn't prepared for what's next, you're going to lack articulation. And I think that's a lot of times, you know, apparent in something like this because you'd have the weaker up bow thing a lot, wouldn't you? I mean, maybe not right at the beginning because of the open A string.
Yeah, thank God for that.
You can get away with it for that one beat.
So Katie, are you talking about how like if I play the first down bow, by the end of that down bow, I have to be ready for the up bow instead of and then up bow? Is that kind of?
It's actually it's the arc, right? So in the space between all the notes, you have time to actually get up, and so you have to be thinking already. It's too late to go. So stop and go practice will get you ready for that earlier, but you have to have your brain thinking ahead, right?
Yeah, and I mean, to kind of make it full circle in this study, right? I mean, so many of the poppers do this, but what you said at the very beginning, Erin, about the chromaticism being all in position. This is so much a study about sort of global thinking and looking for the larger patterns in something, and I think that's also inherent in how you feel it in the bow arm, too. If you're thinking note by note, it's going to be much more, you know,
exactly.
Oh, that's really... You're so right about that. Wow. So instead of thinking like four notes, you're thinking one gesture.
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. I actually, even when you peel off the onion layers, I even love thinking about this whole study in 2 rather than in 4, because often you'll get this sound, but if you can manage to not put an accent on that second beat, you know, so then you can play around with that actual rhythmic thing Popper is doing. 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 3, 4, 1. You know, it's so cool what he's doing actually compositionally.
Like the harmonic rhythm. Yeah. Yeah.
That word.
You know, the thing we say all the time in Bach to make us sound fancy.
That's our fancy girl.
she's rocking it. Calling out all the big terms. I love it.
Well, you know.
Of course you are, of course. Why did you practice that bar that does suddenly out of nowhere, bar 14 or that one?
I did a lot of left hand before bow, so which is really hard. I'm trying not to move my bow prior to my left hand because I find that the bow tends to kind of get a little anxious about that string crossing. So I did that a lot. I did a lot of rhythms too to sort of lighten up the shift. So you know, like the Sicilian. I did some double stops too, which is kind of what I was alluding to at the very beginning. You know, like just to kind of set the hand shape instead of only going for Mr. Pinky, because then I don't know about y'all, but I tend to squeeze if I'm only thinking about one finger instead of like a whole hand balance. So I mean I would say it's still in progress. You know, I'm at like 80-20, you know.
You know what? A lot of people I definitely heard of people taking a little bit of time as well. You know, within reason, if you prepare it properly from and that's okay. You know, it is quite pretty. Right. So, musically speaking, if you were doing this in a piece, you wouldn't just go straight for. You know, just.
I don't think so. Yeah, like
robot face.
That was your robot face.
When Ailbhe like tries to demonstrate like the bad version of things, I'm always like, that sounded really convincing about the way you played it. I'm like,
well, thank you. That was, you know, we'll see in the playthrough if it pans out. Maybe robot face works for me. Actually.
Yeah, I was like, that's actually really in tune.
You know, on a total side note, I'm taking conducting lessons at the moment, and
oh wow,
conductor, who's like a friend of mine. It's for like a funding thing for writing a piece. And he said to me, oh my God, you're doing the robot face while you conduct. So when I concentrate on the cello sometimes, you know, I only find this out afterwards, the face scrunch, you know. So you have to obviously practice, and I do, mouth open, whatever you need to do to make sure that you're not tensing somewhere. But apparently I also conduct, and when I concentrate, I go, and can you imagine doing that in front of an orchestra? Just transferred from cello to conducting.
I've seen worse, Ailbhe. I've seen worse.
Well, yeah.
We all have. Do y'all incorporate like Alexander approach at all in your teaching and playing? Like that's been a real focus for me of late, and so I know exactly what you're saying. And sort of preparing for this project, I would record myself, and oh boy. You know, seeing some things that you just don't see when you're concentrating.
You have to, and I've definitely found doing this project, because everything is quite technical for a popper thing. At the start, I was definitely doing that a lot more than I am now, because I'm trying to incorporate, even though I would naturally if you're doing a concerto or a solo performance, suddenly I think here, if you can start and kind of smile and think about the you know, that calmness, and just reminding yourself anywhere that it gets a tiny bit more tricky, whatever, if you can actually kind of feel that rather than
and I'll tell you what, like if you can do it in popper, you can do it in pretty much anything.
Yes. that is the truth.
That should be a bumper sticker.
5 weeks into this project, it's sort of like, oh, okay.
I even found maybe bar 19, the bottom, where it's interesting, because I always want that feeling of triplety, you know, something that kind of floats, but because of that string crossing, they're quite fast, those circles. You know, so really thinking about where you are so that you don't give any extraneous accents anywhere. that the right word?
That's true. I mean, that spot in particular, I think my biggest challenge was I actually tried to work to play the accent on up bow.
Oh, yeah.
And so
Yeah.
I worked a lot on like that. I'm exaggerating it a lot right now, but that shape instead of that kind of feel. But I guess that's a Mr. Don't influence as well.
Yeah. Totally. I just like he totally saved me in comfort levels actually, because I was doing an awful lot of like, things that were doable, but it just took the panic away, right?
Yeah, I mean, he has in his like book the chart with like how you use the bow.
Yeah,
it's really quite helpful. So
yeah, great. What about your? I found that this one. It's the one before. Where's the one with the shift? We should probably talk about. What do you go? Old finger, new finger. Link note. What do you do?
So that's something that's often sometimes the first time that it's like, first of all, a lot of times students just don't even know where they're going. So they have no idea how to go from A sharp to A flat. That's not something that they've ever done before, so we figure that out like orally first. I tend to teach and do an old finger shift there. What about y'all? Is that what you do?
I was doing an old finger just because it didn't quite work with the new finger a few times, and then I thought I should probably make a plan.
I mean, so you shift to 4? Are you doing? Is that what's in the international edition?
Yeah.
I was practicing it that way, and then today I looked at my.
And it is weirder. So they have 3 actually.
Oh.
Which
that suggests more of a new finger shift, right? Somehow? Why?
Somehow it does.
I actually totally still just because I was trying to do it slightly more cleanly actually.
Yeah.
But either works. You can just make a choice.
I think you can. I guess I tend to, when I shift to 4th finger from 1st finger, I tend to do more old finger shifts because 4th finger is so weak.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So, but you're right. Yeah, you can do either one, but I do think old finger shifts are typically a little bit cleaner, at least in my experience. And then I think like the trick with that is not to let your 1st finger be too heavy. That's what I found I was working on. That can really slow it down instead of if that's too heavy, then it's gonna slow you down, make it a little bit more inaccurate.
Yes. Yeah. One other unusual thing I threw in here just for entertainment was that often in these poppers, even though something is, the détaché stroke is what we're going for, I still like to vary it occasionally in the way that you would in, say, like a Beethoven sonata or the Bach. So for me, those chromatic ones were so juicy that I suddenly felt myself doing and it's like hilarious. I'm aware of that. But I do think there is room for people to think about different bow lengths, and you can throw in, there's nothing to say that you can't in a certain chromatic area, that you can suddenly do a legato stroke and then change wherever you come back to the new section. So people can play around with that and see how it feels.
Well, Katie, how would you characterize this bow stroke? I mean, you use the word détaché kind of. What would you say?
Yeah, I mean, that's a great question. Again, it's so much about like markings and editorial. The edition we're playing on has nothing marked in. Yeah. Right. The edition I practiced on earlier this week is with dots, Dots. But I wouldn't call it like a staccato stroke because it is moderato and it's a little too slow for that. I don't know. I mean, what would you call it? I wouldn't say maybe détaché.
I would say brush, personally.
Yeah.
Because that covers all mannerisms.
Exactly. I mean, I don't know what I would call it in the Italian sense. but I call this like a grab and float bow stroke. Ooh. So like, you pluck the string and then it lands on the next bow. So it's like this, And the float can be really floaty or almost no float at all. But there's not like a effort to lift the bow. That's what I find I have to teach a lot. So sometimes I teach this one totally on the string, so until we've got the coordination down. And then I'm like, okay, we'll just release the bow a little bit more. And then it starts to kind of come off the string a little bit. And then you can have that like palette of colors.
Oh yeah, I love that.
You know, but that's how I teach off the string. I teach it from the string. Not everyone does that, but that's just my approach.
That's a great way of doing it because it creates all of this comfort and balance.
One thing that I wish I had learned earlier as a cellist is that I don't hold the cello in the bow. The cello holds the cello in the bow. Like I don't hold the bow. I don't hold the cello. Like that is like I'm not doing anything. I'm just making sure it doesn't fall, right? Yeah. And so it's like we want to access as much of that natural. We want to be sensitive to what the bow will naturally do for us if we have a balance in place that allows it to do that. So it's almost like I'm trying to create sensitivity to what the, like, I want to feel that bow hair plucking the string. And I can't do that if I'm like trying to do it, if that makes sense.
This is a classic case of less is more. That the more we, that's why all this Alexander technique, Feldenkrais, and anything that you can do to basically retreat back to what you never learned about cello, which is just natural weight. Anything that you're trying to do just doesn't help, really, does it?
Yeah. And I mean, I also just love the way you talked about articulation as a palette of colors, because I think we're so much in a world that likes to like put things into boxes of like, this is off, this is on, this is black, this is white. And so often, you know, strokes, you know, especially if we're playing on our own and we're not being like,
and you have to adapt in between. So it's not necessarily all the same the whole way through a movement or something, you know?
Totally.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not really someone that like identifies bow strokes very specifically by their Italian names. Some people are, but I find like in the string world, like we each have a slightly different definition of what spiccato or staccato or martelé or marcato, like.
So glad you said that. Sure.
So I don't,
because I think it also is it's like a source of a lot of anxiety for people, you know? Like if you're a young person and you're like, I don't know what
spiccato is.
I don't know what martelé, like I don't know, and like gosh, some violinists use ones that I still have no idea.
Like jeté, and I'm
like, like that one. Yeah, I see it in my Sev check, and I'm like,
that's actually just the guy. Like jeté is just off, like jumping. That's what it means, right? Like it's also a ballet stroke.
I can feel like there's probably like some like Russian violinist somewhere who would like make me feel really bad about not knowing what it is.
I'm sure there's an article written about it. You can read about it. Like I teach like the string methods for music education people. I teach the cello and bass at my university, and I'm supposed to define for them what does staccato mean and what does spiccato and what does martelé mean, and I feel a little bit weird doing that because I'm like, well, there's so many exceptions, but okay.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I love it, but it keeps us learning every day, right?
I mean, that's why I use grab and float, because that works for everybody.
It does.
I love it.
Very descriptive.
And we should probably just keep an eye on our time. And
because I know you have to.
Should we possibly go for a play? Is it?
Easy and gorgeous and beautiful.
It's so ringing and all the tuning was so gorgeous that all the intervals just like resonance of the cello.
Yeah, and I loved your tempo. It was just
a little slower.
No, really,
Thank
nice.
you.
Just gorgeous. So
thank you. Well,
it's a great way to start your day, right? Like,
it's really different to like warm up and then like, okay, I get 3 tries, or whatever. Versus like, they're 2 cellists who are very accomplished. Like,
yeah,
okay.
The thing is, Erin, you have to realize we've been doing this for almost a year, so it's a little less scary. But it is still this thing of like, oh my god, like I've just talked about how to play this for an hour, and now I have to
like live. Like my fingers are cold, and I have to go for it. It's funny.
So, it's good adversity training for us.
Yeah, whatever doesn't kill you makes you stronger. All right. To listen to, and people are always like, oh, wondering which ones they could possibly do as an encore. I actually think even this one is it would really work as an encore.
Which I love the one, I call it the Hawaiian Etude. What is it? 30. No, I always call that like my trip to Hawaii.
I love that.
Too cheesy.
I know, I need a little like daiquiri, pina colada thing.
Ooh, should we go to Hawaii?
Cello Power Congress in Hawaii.
Let's do it.
2025.
I'm there. I'm there. Oh, this was so fun, y'all.
Thank you so much for being part of it. It's just so great to see you do all that. So we'll have to connect up in real life when we're back in person again.
I really enjoyed it.
It's brilliant. You're so lovely and so positive. It seemed like exactly the same type of, I think, teacher that we are as well.
Oh, good.
Anyway,
yeah, we should chat soon. It's great to meet you.
Okay, yes.
Bye.
Bye.